Hi, this is Rob Polenick from C3 Method. I'm doing a chest and back workout today at Fitness Factory of Charlotte. Amazing gym with tons of equipment. I'll definitely show you like a panoramic view of everything they have going on. What I wanted to do in today's video was to talk about rep tempo and proper execution for how we perform repetitions. It can sound like a basic thing, however, it is extremely important and it has a significant impact on the results of your training. What I'm starting with here is a chest fly to pre-exhaust my chest before I get into compound movements like chest presses. And when I'm doing a warm-up movement, my rep tempo and my thought process towards how I perform the reps is going to be different than when I'm in my heaviest of movements. So I wanted to start with this and then we'll kind of go from there. I actually haven't performed any sets or any reps on this machine yet. I want to truly start from the start with you. So what I did was I selected a weight that's light and I'm going to be performing, usually I kind of keep my rep goal open-ended, say 10 to 20 reps. So as I'm performing the movement, if I want to shift my position a little bit, if I want to work on more blood flow, stretching anything open, I don't feel like, oh, I said I was only going to do 10, so I have to stop at 10. I want to allow myself some freedom with my reps to really feel the movement and find the position that's going to work best for me. Now, the intensity that a warm-up is I should be able to talk while I'm doing this, so I'm going to. But my goal is to find the end ranges of this machine or this position of this exercise. So whatever exercise you're starting with, you're trying to find out, okay, where's the most stretched I can be that still feels like it's isolating the target muscle? And then if I contract through the pathway, when does it feel most contracted? So I'll practice the repetitions at a speed in which I can feel both ends of the movement. I want to feel the stretch, I want to feel the squeeze. I want to see if maybe going maybe a little lower feels better today. Maybe that opens up more of my chest, or maybe I actually want to target a little bit higher and I can feel that through the upper portion of my chest. I can really play around with my position to just find what I'm wanting to target today and what's going to feel best for this movement. For warm-ups, I tend to start slow and then I'll work my way a little bit faster in the working sets. So for today, this movement is actually feeling really good in this higher angle where I'm pushing a little bit above parallel to the floor. This is feeling like it's a really good stretch in the outer portion of my chest, but I can also feel the strands across my upper chest engaging. And anytime you can get upper chest involved, that's definitely a good idea. Nobody has too overdeveloped of an upper chest. So this is actually feeling really good. And this is the pace that I would use in my warm-up sets. Again, trying to find the pathway and the end ranges that's going to feel best for that movement for that day. I did my warm-up set, so this will probably be my first working set. I'm going to aim for a set of 10 to 14 reps. I actually did chest 48 hours ago. My schedule's been a little crazy this week, so I've been training a little more frequent per body part. That way, if with all the schedule changes, if my intensity has to be a little bit lower because I'm training at different times or different places, I want to increase my frequency. And that will balance out the intensity coming down a little bit. And then the other modification is I'm going to use a little bit of a higher rep range. Maybe for this, I might normally do sets of 6 to 10. I'm going to allow it to be more about 10 to 14, so I don't need as heavy of weight. That keeps me a little bit safe, but it still is in the muscle building rep range goal. So now I got my first working set. What hopefully you'll notice is not much changes with my speed or the way in which I was performing the repetitions from the warm-ups. When I'm doing an isolation exercise, I'm not trying to move the most weight. I'm trying to isolate the target muscle with maximum intensity, but I don't want to use a weight that is too heavy to where I have to start to use momentum, or when I'm coming out, I have to like bounce out of the bottom. I want to make sure it's always a muscular contraction and that the muscle stays in control the whole time. Then when I'm doing a compound movement where there's other muscles involved and it's kind of multi-joint, multi-muscle, you're less risk of injury. You can kind of push the intensity or maybe the speed or tempo a little bit. But on isolations, I always favor being a little too slow rather than too fast. Okay, so we'll get our first working set in, and hopefully you can see the speed and the quality of the repetitions. Okay, that went well. I think I got 14, and that was a very good quality. If I would have tried maybe one more or two more, I definitely would have started to lose technique. I would have started around my shoulders forward. So I really like that weight. Since I got towards the higher end of the range, you might think, oh, should you add weight in the next set? I'm not going to, because I'm now one more set fatigued than I was before. So likely to try to get to another 12, 13, or 14 is going to be harder. So I don't want to add weight just yet. I'll see how that second set goes. And if I do additional sets, I would then kind of after each set analyze, do I need more weight or not? But factoring in that I already just did a set, I'm now that one more set fatigued, also lets me know that the next set is going to be harder even at the same weight. Okay, second set, hopefully same rep tempo, same control. Okay, I think I was 13. So that was very good. Exactly what I thought happened. I'm one rep, was one set more fatigued, so lost a little rep there. So I'm gonna keep the same weight, catch the third set, and then we'll move on to the first compound press, and we'll compare the rep tempo and overall rep technique. Now we've moved on to the first compound press. This is a machine low incline chest press. I really love this machine. It's kind of a copycat of the flex leverage machines. This is a fun angle. I believe it's probably around like maybe 10-20% degrees, so 10 to 20 degrees, which would be on most commercial benches 1 notch above flat. Most commercial benches go 15 degrees, so it's 0, 15, 30, 45, and so on. I like having a low incline because it helps to bring more of that upper portion of the chest in. So I would consider a 15-degree incline to be the kind of normal standard, the way I would press the most often. And then from there, every once in a while, I'll do a flat press, but that tends to be more dominant in the outer and lower portion of the chest development. And then if you go higher than 15 degrees, you start to get more of the upper chest, but also brings in the shoulders as well. So it depends on what you want to focus on. For this machine and my first compound movement, my rep tempo is going to be similar in concept in that I want to make sure the targeted muscles stay the things that are doing the work. I want to make sure I'm not using momentum, not bouncing out of the bottom, not throwing the weight to the top. The goal isn't to move the weight. The goal is to create stress in my chest. So once I can no longer feel my chest, I would know that I'm either doing it wrong with technique or I have too heavy of a weight load. If I'm wanting to develop strength, then yes, I would look at efficiency of movement. I would load the exercise and I would try to create a blend across all muscles and joints. But this video is about muscle growth, not strength. So if we're wanting to grow the chest, I want to make sure I can always feel my chest. If it is too heavy, then you're not training the right muscle. I was training a client this morning and we were doing hip thrusts, and she was saying that as we were starting to get more fatigued, she was starting to feel her quads more involved in the hip thrust. So we actually took some weight off, and that allowed her to better mind-muscle connection, find her glutes again. And that was the goal of the movement. So that would be totally fine if you have to reduce weight, if it allows you to actually feel the target muscle. So with this, I'll stop talking and I'll get into a set. With this one, I just want to make sure that I squeeze my way to the top, but I don't lock out and stop. So I want to get to the top and then slowly come right back into the eccentric load. I want to make sure the chest is under tension at all times. Whew. Okay, so that weight was a little bit light to call a working set, so I'll call that a warm-up and add a little more weight. But one of the things I want to note there is you can see my concentric speed, the contraction, was definitely faster than the eccentric, the lowering portion, and that is going to stay pretty much all the time for me because we are stronger in the eccentric phase, the stretching under weight load phase. We're stronger in that phase than we are in the concentric phase. So if I perform the concentrics a little bit faster, still feeling the target muscle, but then slow down the eccentrics, it allows me to better maximize the muscular stress and fatigue in that movement. So try that in your next working sets. Make the eccentric portion of the movement slower than the concentric portion. Okay, I added some weight. Let's see how it goes. Okay. Oh, I don't know how it comes across the camera, but internally, around like 6, 7, 8, I started to speed up the concentrics a little bit But then conversely, I tried to slow down the eccentrics. So I know that in order to get more time under tension, to squeak out a couple reps, it wasn't the reps that was the goal, it was just more time under tension, that speeding up the concentric would help me do that. However, I want to then slow down the eccentric. So if I'm doing one thing that makes it a little bit easier, I want to do something that makes it a little bit harder. So that way the overall intensity of the set is still maximal. So I felt like that was really good. I'm going to take a big rest and then I'll get an additional set here. But this would be the rep tempo, the scheme, the setup that I would think of for my major compound movements. I've moved on to the second press, which will be the final chest exercise. I'm going to be doing a neutral grip, and this will help still push the chest further into fatigue and failure, but it's going to bring the triceps into the workout. Since I'm doing chest and back together, I would typically, if I was doing chest, I would actually end that workout with some tricep work. When I do chest, I usually do kind of like more like a push day, so I'll add middle delts and I'll add triceps. Since I'm doing chest and back today, I'm going to be doing a shorter version of chest. I don't want to miss out on the tricep work, so I'm going to pick a neutral grip chest press, and that way I can get a little bit of tricep work in while still finishing my chest. So that's a little bit of a tip if you want to try that. And then what I want to do with this movement is I'm going to do what I call rhythm reps. So I showed you in the past, the previous exercise, that I normally would go slow and controlled. I would do the concentric under control, but faster than the eccentric, but it's a very methodical, kind of slow rep tempo. I want to show a faster rep tempo in this exercise and talk about when we do move faster, it doesn't mean that we move with less control. You still want to feel the muscle working, but we tend to just kind of have more of a rhythm to everything. There's like a beat, like a 1, 2, 3. It has kind of a more rhythm. And I like that sometimes because if your contractile strength is really fatiguing towards the end of a workout, if you try to stay with too strict of reps, it can be very hard to get anything more out of the muscle. If you're really trying to push intensity, if you really need to progress your overall strength, finding a blend of moving some weight but staying under control is very helpful, so that way you don't just fail the workout at like picture perfect repetition tempo. You can actually find some way to drive further into fatigue. An example of this, if you ever want to watch a video of Branch Warren or Johnny Jackson, if you want to look up those names for bodybuilding, they move with very aggressive, fast rhythm pace movements, but they're freaking jacked and it clearly works. I want to show that in this exercise. When I think of rhythm reps, what I'm thinking of doing is I want to control my transitions. So when I'm coming to the bottom and going back into the next press, I want to feel like I'm slowing the brakes and then contracting out. So it's slow, contract, slow, contract. And then at the top, I want to get to the top, but I don't want to lock out my joints. I don't want it to be a jolt. So you'll see I'll get to the top and down, top and down. So there's no herky-jerky, violent movement at the top. If we control the transitions, even if we're moving a little bit faster, it makes sure that the target muscle still stays under stress. And when we stand up out of the movement, we're gonna be like, holy crap, you know, that muscle is so pumped, but you're gonna feel it in the muscle, not in your connective tissues or joints. So I'll go ahead and catch a couple sets that you can see on video with this. And it's okay if you move with rhythm reps later in the workout, but I would definitely start with those more controlled repetitions at the beginning of the workout. We're switching over to back exercises now, and just like I did with the chest, I warmed up the chest with an isolation movement with slow, controlled rep tempo, rep execution. I'm going to be doing the same thing here with back. I'm doing cable straight arm pull downs, but I want to show a little bit of a variation. Is rather than just a continual motion that's slow and controlled, we can actually add concentric pauses. So I'm going to come down at the full contraction and pause, and then come up, stretch, down, and pause. When we're doing an isolation movement, adding that pause can help you find that mind-muscle connection to really kind of hone in on what muscle you want to be doing the movement. This is a great thing that you can use in all of your warm-ups for all exercises, but definitely for isolation movements. And I'm actually going to be combining that with the technique we just discussed, which was like rhythm reps. So I'm going to be doing a couple paused reps and then a couple rhythm reps. And this is something you can do when you're doing isolation movements, when you're warming up for bigger movements. It's just a fun variation that you can add to your training if you would like to. Okay, there you go. So there's some pauses on the concentrics, and then on those rhythm reps, like we said, you still want to control your transitions. You don't want it to be herky-jerky movements. You don't want anything pulling on the connective tissues. So as I was getting to the bottom, I was slowly controlling the change of direction, and the same thing at the top. So this is something you can add to your warm-ups to give you a little bit of variety to your training style. Now we've moved on to a pull down. I'm doing a one arm pull down. What's interesting to note is different muscles allow for different variations of how you perform the repetitions. An example is going to be chest and back. When I'm performing chest, especially a chest fly, like a chest isolation, when I get to the full stretch, if I were to sit in that stretch for too long or relax into this stretch, it increases the risk of injury since that muscle crosses over the joint, and if we overstretch, we can get into our shoulder, we might pull on our bicep. There's a lot of muscles and connective tissues that can be hurt in that stretched position. In contrast to that, what I'm doing here is a neutral grip pull down, and what you'll find is when you're at the top of a pull down, especially one arm, neutral grip, and you're at the top in a stretch position, you can actually really let go into that stretch, and there is a very small likelihood for injury, assuming the weight you're using is correct, and assuming that when you start the next contraction, you start it with your lat muscle, trying to pull the shoulder down, not with your bicep, trying to pull the handle. So you want to make sure you start the repetition with your lat, thinking of pulling the shoulder down to the hip. What this allows us is our rep performance, we can actually exaggerate that stretch position a little bit when doing back exercises compared to chest exercises. There's going to be other muscles that kind of have this same relationship, and you can play around with that. So this is to raise your awareness, and then you can kind of play with that on your own. So what you'll see when I'm performing this movement is I'm going to be much slower leading into the stretch. I'm going to kind of spend some time in the stretch, and then I'm going to think of squeezing my lat and then driving my elbow down to my hip. And once I'm at the bottom, I'm going to make sure I got a good contraction, but I'm basically going to start right back up into the next eccentric. So the top half of the motion is much slower. The bottom half is gonna look a little faster, and then again, it's slow at the top, quick at the bottom, and you can play around with that tempo. We don't want it too extreme, but internally you'll feel that it's more extreme than what it probably looks like on the outside. So I want to throw that out there, something you play with if you're a little more advanced and you're looking for something a little bit more fun, is to play around with the tempo of your reps at the end range versus the contracted range. So the origin, insertion, extension, contraction, all that stuff. Just when you get to the stretch, milk it out a little bit. When you're in the contraction, make sure you get it, but since it's the weaker part of the range of motion, you don't want to spend too long there. It would actually limit the overall performance. Enough of me yapping, let's actually show you what this looks like. Okay, so that's the goal, is I'm getting that last part of the contraction a little quick, but then I'm controlling the eccentric, milking out that stretch, squeezing down, and then again, that little quick little finish. So you can play with that tempo a little bit, and it allows you to really maximize the full fatigue of the muscle through all phases of the repetition. Now we're set up for our last exercise. This will be a variation of a row. I'm actually standing next to a shoulder machine, which is my favorite bicep machine, and it's actually a great back machine. So this is a free motion shoulder. You're supposed to sit in here and press overhead, but I actually love a lot of variations off of this machine. I used to own this machine, so I used to play around a lot with variations and positions. My favorite bicep curl is using short handles. I'll actually stand and lean back against that the back support for the seat, and then I do curls like this. My favorite reason for this is you can change your position to change the stress load in the movement. And then also on these free motion machines, the weight selection in the cable stack allows for really small changes. So it's excellent for training females, anybody who is maybe recovering from an injury, and then also males that might struggle with normal weight stacks that have larger weight jumps. I like this especially for fine-tuning that weight selection. And then with the biceps, you can start upright, and that really exaggerates that full stretch position. And then as you would fatigue, you start to lean forward, and then you start changing it into the shortened range of motion. So this is actually a mechanical drop set. You can change your positioning without dropping the weight. You just change the mechanical position, the way in which you perform the movement, and that allows you variation for the intensity, allows you to drive that further into fatigue. So if you have access to one of these, it's a great bicep exercise. For back, what I love about this is you can stand on the opposing side of the cable, and I can use the seat as support, and I can actually pull and squeeze into my lower lat. So this is a great variation to get to the lower lat. There are a lot of machines that allow you to do that, but what I like about this specifically is the hand support, or you would find like a chest supported machine, but that really takes away from the stress on your lower back. And then also with the freedom of this handle, you can twist it and turn it however you want, and you can find the right position for you in regards to the hand position that allows you to feel your lower lat. And then also, last thing, and then I'll move on, is you can change your torso angle. So a normal chest supported row, you're stuck being straight forward. With this, I can actually angle slightly away and get more of a stretch in my lower lat, and I can change my torso position as I'm doing the movement to get a better stretch, and then a deeper contraction into the lower lat. So there's a ton of freedom, but there's also that stability which allows you to stay strict in your overall position. Okay, enough of me chit-chatting. I'll actually do some work. So with this, I do still use my wrist straps. The reason why I like using them is it decreases the stress on the grip, so I can focus on my back and make sure my back is the limiter, not my grip. So once I have this in position, I'm going to step back and accept the weight load, and now I can kind of turn and stretch. So I'm dropping my right hip away. So if I'm using my right arm, I'm using my right hip and dropping it away to get a better stretch in my lat. And then I'm going to drive and squeeze, stretch and squeeze. So you can see I have a slight underhand grip, and I'm uprighting my torso as I drive through the contraction, and that's allowing me to really isolate that lower lat. So this is a wonderful variation for targeting the lower lat, even though this machine isn't actually for that. Let me get 2 more reps. 1, 2. Good. So you can see there is I'm also implementing that concept of pausing in the contraction to make sure that I'm not using my bicep, I'm not using other parts of my back, like just my upper lats or my mid back. If I really want to target that lower lat, I want to pause so I can feel if the lower lat is actually contracted. So I'll do a couple warm-up sets, and then I'll film a heavy, hard working set for you to see. Hey, buddy. Hey, baby girl. Yeah. How are you? You having a good day? Yeah, having a good day. You're a good girl. Sweetie pie. So there you go. We went through a chest and back workout. If you're interested in that part of the video, I did a chest isolation and then 2 different presses. For back, I did a lat isolation and then a kind of a vertical movement and then a horizontal movement. That would be a great way to structure a chest and back day. And then we also talked about how to perform our repetitions. In general, we want to stay under control at all times. We want the target muscle to be what we can feel at all times. We want to pick a weight that's heavy enough to challenge that muscle, but not so heavy that we can't feel that muscle separate from the muscles that would be stabilizing or supporting the movement. So give those techniques a try, give this workout a try if you'd like. If you have any questions, put them in the comment section below, and thank you for watching.